Welcome to the Not AFib podcast, powered by the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. My name is Mark Flaughter. The prevalence of mental illness in emergency medical services. Nationwide, there's a significantly increased rate of depression, anxiety, fatigue, sleep disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and suicidality among EMS workers than the general public. An anonymous survey conducted in 2017 aimed to evaluate the potential risk of future suicidal behavior among 903 pre-hospital providers. This survey included 20 different EMS agencies spanning urban, suburban, and rural settings. The survey was constructed with the use of the Suicidal Behaviors Questionnaire Revised, SBQ-R, in addition to questions regarding demographics, EMS experience, and relevant medical history. The SBQ-R breaks down questions to encompass the four dimensions of suicidality: lifetime suicidal ideation and or attempt, frequency of suicidal ideation over the past 12 months, threat of future suicide attempts, and the likelihood of suicidal behavior in the future. An SBQ-R score of 7 or greater is considered a valid predictor for an increased risk for future suicidal behavior. Results collected from the 2017 anonymous survey revealed that 31.3% of the respondents had an SBQ-R score of greater than 7. Of the 903 EMS providers included in the survey, 27.2% reported experiencing at least one suicidal ideation in the past year, a rate that is 7 times higher than the average population. Currently, it is estimated that approximately 20% of adults within the general United States population will experience a period of mental illness at some point within their lives. That occurrence rate increases to approximately 30% among EMS personnel. This data reveals the large prevalence of mental illness among EMS providers. However, many of these individuals conceal their struggle with mental health, thus going untreated. Experiencing a prolonged episode of decline in mental health has a direct correlation with the likelihood of completing a suicide attempt. Data pulled from the Arizona Vital Statistics Information Management System electronic death registry regarding all adult deaths between 2009 and 2015 revealed suicide rates among EMS personnel to estimate around 5.2%, while non-EMS death by suicide occurred at a rate of approximately 2.2%. Information from these studies pertaining to mental illness among EMS providers confirms that these are not random situations. There is a clear cause for the occurrences. That is an excerpt from an article by Taylor Shearer that appeared in the Journal of Emergency Medical Services in May of 2022. Given that the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, I felt that this was a very appropriate topic to discuss. And I am joined by Kim Vest, who is a counselor in the St. Louis area where I work. Kim has over 18 years of work experience in the mental health field and is passionate about providing quality care and support to diverse populations, especially first responders. As the clinic director and certified first responder counselor at LE Mental Health, she leads a team of professionals who offer trauma-informed and evidence-based counseling services to clients who face high stress and high-risk situations. She has the honor of serving first responders and those dear to them. She is a certified first responder counselor. She cares for responders through the Missouri Crisis Intervention Team and is an International Association of Firefighters mental health provider for the state of Missouri. She is the founder of First Responder Wellness, whose mission is to care for the physical, mental, and emotional strength of our local first responders. She also founded and runs a nonprofit organization that raises awareness and funds for first responder wellness programs and initiatives. In addition, she teaches social sciences at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis, sharing her knowledge and expertise with the next generation of healthcare providers. Her core competencies are leadership, communication, collaboration, and compassion. She is driven by the mission of improving the mental health and well-being of individuals and communities through research, education, and practice. Kim, welcome, and thank you for your time today.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
As we get started, let's first find out what got you into the field of mental health provider.
Well, I think that it chose me. It's one of those things that I guess when I was little, I didn't really know that that was going to be how I use my life. And then it just ended up that being someone who cares for the hearts of others was chosen. Like they chose me, and so I said. Ever since then, I've said yes. It hasn't always been the easiest road. It wasn't like it was just like a direct line. Like some people decide to use their career and just like, yep, this is what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
And so that's why I know it's pretty special. And there was really there was nothing other thing that I could do. So,
Okay. What drew you to working with the first responder community?
yeah, so I've been asked that before. And so I think, just to be honest, there's, we have first responders in my family. When I was little, I remember when I was in kindergarten, we got those Top Finder
Mhm.
stickers. And so I was like, I got to go home right now and put the sticker right in my window. And so I was just like, I just felt safe. When I was little, there was a fire, and this big old fireman like took me. I was like 6 years old, and he took me to my neighbor's house, and then you would think that might be it, but then my dad was, he needed you guys through the end of his life. He had many heart attacks, he had some strokes, and so you guys were a part of our life. But I think one of um, the most profound moments is when I defined it was that my niece, Paisley, passed away from a car fire. And that was tragic for our family. But the day that we went to go lay her to rest, when I drove up and I got there, there was this fleet of fire trucks and this fleet of police officers who had cared for her and who had cared for my brother because it was his granddaughter. And they acted like they didn't have any other place to go. They were just with us and our family. And they just, it was just so moving to know that their day off that they were spending with us. And so I think at that point is when I declared that I would then, how they served us, that I would serve them. So I think that was probably the pivotal moment for me. And then after that, there've just been doors being open. People, like this makes sense,
Mhm.
became trauma informed. And that then led to more education. And then um, just the trust of the fire service has just been such an honor.
That's great. One of the things that you mentioned was the trauma care, and we talked specifically, or the article mentioned the first responders. And when you're dealing with a first responder, whether it's a firefighter, paramedic, police officer that's having a mental health crisis, there's a uniqueness about that individual that not just anyone can work with them, because we've heard horror stories about, and it talked earlier in the podcast last year. I had a group from my ambulance service manager course that did their research project on a pre-screening device or pre-screening tool for first responders. And one of the things that brought about that was stories of first responders that have gone to seek counseling and sought help, where they actually have to get help for the person that's supposed to be helping them because they
Yeah,
can't handle it. So
right.
there's a uniqueness working with first responders. Can you talk a little bit about, without getting too much into the weeds, about what differentiates first responder community from the lay public, if you will?
Well, I do think that there has to be a similar personality. There's lots of rascals in the fire service. And so I think you have to know that you have to be in that with them. But I also know that you get one shot. And so you gotta be ready, gotta be on your game. And I feel like caring for first responders, like they'll sniff you out.
Mhm.
They're looking for someone who's authentic, who can hold space for them, who they don't have to then care for and say, "Are you okay? Was that too much for me to tell you?" And so I do think that that's a part of it too. Like you can't just put any bush league therapist and then,
Mhm.
if you're not informed of this population, and also that there's a circle of trust that's given, and it's very rare, so you have to give your best shot at that. So that's been my experience, and I think it's can be tested too. So
Mhm. When we talk about, you talk about being prepared, are how would someone who says, okay, I'd like to work with first responders, but what do I need to do to prepare myself to work with them? What are some things that you might recommend that would prepare someone to be able to work with first responders, and create that authenticity that you just mentioned a couple minutes ago?
So one of the things that you'll hear if you are a therapist is that, how would you know? And no, you don't know, you haven't been
Mhm.
there. And I think that that is also a part of the brotherhood and sisterhood of being a first responder, is that you have these shared experiences that no one else has. And so, how would someone be able to relate as a therapist when they don't know? They've never experienced
Mhm.
that, right? Except for maybe my own story, or, maybe watching from a distance. So, what I have been able to experience on several different parts of my career is just being immersed in the community, or in the fire service, or and by how I do that is that I have relationships with the fire districts and local police, and also ambulance service in St. Charles, and so I'll do ride-alongs with them, and that's something that I take initiative, because if they're trusting me, they'll need to know that I I came as close as I could to being a first responder. I did everything I could in order to understand with the most sincere heart, so that when they say you wouldn't understand, they could say you can understand some things, because
Mhm.
there's no way to understand how it is to be a first responder unless you are one. But you also need the care, and so how can I do that, or how can we do that? It's just to take seriously and just immerse yourself um, in that community.
And you did a couple ride-alongs with our organization,
Hmm.
and the importance of that is, eh, when I talk to people about some of the things that I've experienced in the past, they, either professionally or just at a personal level, they have a hard time believing some of the things that obviously we describe when
Yeah.
whether we talk to a mental health professional, or whether we're just relaying an experience to someone. So by doing that ride along, you get to see exactly what they see. And that is extremely beneficial,
Mhm.
because of the fact that now when they come to you with an experience, you're like, I've been there. I know exactly what that, or I know what you're talking about.
Right, right.
Mhm.
I've had multiple ride-alongs, but and they'll also, like what you're saying, Mark, is that one of my firefighters would be like, Kim, I don't even know all the things that I've seen. I can't collect it all,
Right.
and so as far as like sitting down and saying, tell me it all, which I would never do,
Mhm.
but at the same time, like, it's all in there. It just happens because there's no like break from it,
Right.
it just collects
Right.
on you. So.
Pivoting just a little bit to some of the numbers that we talked about, or we read in the excerpt just a few minutes ago. 31% of respondents had that score of 7 or greater on the SBQ-R um, survey. And as I mentioned, one of my previous shows, we talked to a group that had done a research project on a pre-screening tool for first responders to use. You are involved with our organization's peer support program as an early notice if someone is having a situation or feels that they may need to talk to someone. Unfortunately, with the first responder community, a lot of us wait until it's too late, or
Yeah.
until the last minute. So can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of some type of pre-screening tool, or recognizing early that you may need to talk to somebody before it gets to a crisis mode?
Well, I do think that these discussions are already happening. They're not as hidden. People are talking
Mhm.
about this, and the IAFF is obviously talking about this and saying this is necessary. But I do feel like that as far as each of the fire districts to have this pre-screening, it really isn't like a major screening, but just,
Mhm.
are you feeling down? How long have you felt down? How are you sleeping? Because trauma stores in our body. And so it acts out in our relationships, it acts out in our sleep. And so these questions, although it brief, just 20 questions, you'll find just like where your baseline is. And so you'll know within minutes if you're at risk. I teach at the fire academy, and that's one of the things that I do there is just give them a baseline for compassion fatigue, so that moving forward, as they become a firefighter or they become more in their career, that they'll say, here's where I was. How am I still doing? So that pre-screening is so important. And I also think that I love this in the state of Missouri, especially in St. Louis. Everyone is getting their pre-screenings when they get their physical.
Mhm.
And so that, I think, has lent itself to these important conversations.
Right, and you mentioned the component within the annual physical, and that is a tremendous asset for early recognition, as
Sure
well
is.
as some of the things that you just mentioned. Um, so when someone is going through their physical, or what are some flags when maybe when they're doing that mental health portion? What are some things that you as a counselor you're looking at when you're giving this particular component of the physical that may tip you off that this individual may be having an issue, or may be on the cusp of having an issue?
Okay, that's a great question because there's a few things I'm looking to see. The depression level, okay, because that can come on us and we not even know. Like it just becomes our normal, especially because of how trauma does. It begins to mute us and it begins to dampen our spirit. And so we'll begin to like carry around all of this vicarious trauma, and it takes the us out of us, where it's like I'm just not myself anymore. I don't know where he or she went, but I'm just not myself. And so I'm paying attention to that. I also know that in the fire service and first responder community is that there's lots of celebrations, lots of fun to be had. Like we play hard and we work hard. And so that intake of alcohol, which is a part of the culture, 20 beers a day isn't okay. That's a significant sign of something else. And so, if someone is honest, the guys are like, we don't tell you the truth. But a lot are very sincere about it and said, like, here's where I am. This is what I know that I am numbing.
Mhm.
The other thing is just like responses to relationships. Are you fully present? How are you and your loved one doing? Are you close to your wife? Do your children know you? These types of things are like the questions are formed to kind of get at it, you know.
Mhm.
And so that's a big deal. There's a high level of divorce rate in the fire service, first responders, and so that is one of the things that I look at as well. And then how are they sleeping? Okay, so of course, like 48-hour shift, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. Like
Mhm.
you can't sleep here, especially if you're on the ambulance, you're going. But what I mean by that is, what is your quality of sleep? Like, do you go to sleep and then you wake up because something's startling you? Do you go to sleep and then you wake up at 2 and you can't go back to sleep? I had a first responder who ran numerous suicide calls. Like, it was just like an everyday thing. Like, this is what I do. And
Mhm.
eventually he was like, Kim, I am having like these violent dreams. And the dreams were never about the suicide calls, but it's that cognitive dissonance that happens that um, something, this is bad, but I'm helping. And it's hard to like process, because even as strong as all of you are, you still have a nervous system. You still have a brain that goes, I don't know how to process that. That's really hard for me. And so I'm looking at quality of sleep. And then lastly, if they are not feeling comfortable at that kitchen table, if they're isolating, or if they're not a part of breakfast, or the shenanigans that happens at that kitchen
Hmm.
table because they're isolating, that's a huge red flag. And I will say to my leaders, like, keep an eye on your people. They need to be with you at that table.
Hmm.
So those are the things that I always was like, oh, okay, okay, there's something else here.
Hmm. So if you have an individual that you're doing the mental health screening on the physical, and you recognize some of the things that you just discussed with us, what are the next steps? Do you notify that organization's leadership? Do you notify the individual personally at the time that says, hey, you may want to think of how would you handle a situation like that where you have someone that maybe has a couple red flags on that screening?
Well, I will tell you right away. I would never notify leadership.
Okay.
That to me would be a breach, and
Okay.
would go back to the previous conversation that we were having about, you get one shot.
Right.
And so
Right.
if they, and I run a clinic here, and they were talking about, just having like just a little bit of camera, just to make sure that we're safe
Mhm.
here. Sometimes we're here late. And I said, we're going to have to do it a different way, because if my first responder comes in and sees that camera and they're not fully trusting that someone else will find out about this, they won't come back.
Mhm.
And I'm just not willing to risk it,
Okay.
because I have had people sit and go, are they watching? Because it's a
Mhm.
huge, brave risk for them
Mhm.
to come in and say, I'm not okay.
Right.
So saying that, in that pre-screening is when I would say, what do you think? What do you think I think?
Mhm.
How are you feeling? And what do you think you need? And because it's just about building relationships and trust, that I'm not going to tell you you need anything that you don't need. But these show, and because you've been honest, that there is more, that there's
Mhm.
some healing that needs to be done here. So um, and so that's just a private conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you touched on. One of the things that for so long has been, at least the 20 plus years that I've been in public safety and fire and EMS, is one of the stigmas was who's going to find out. Well,
Right.
what happens if someone finds out? So that was for so long. That was one of the things that kind of kept people from
Mm,
going down the path to making themselves better.
right.
And they didn't want to look like they were weak, like you mentioned at the kitchen table.
Right.
You don't want to be that guy at the
Yeah.
kitchen table.
Right.
Fortunately, a lot of that stigma is being removed through articles like we read, through
Mhm.
conversation, through different pre-screening tools. That it's okay. Uh,
I know.
mhm.
I know.
So uh, we know that post-traumatic stress can build up over just repetitive calls, but then you also have that once in a lifetime, that once in a career call that is just so much, it overwhelms you. We look at
Yeah.
situations like the Oklahoma City bombing in 1996. Obviously, September 11th is a huge one. But
Mhm.
you just look at Columbine, the shootings,
Right.
the Newtown shootings, the importance of what we call a diffusing immediately after that call. Talk to us a little bit about how important it is to address feelings that you may have after a significant incident like one of the ones we just described.
Okay. So I would say that that's a very delicate time period.
Hmm.
Okay. So as you know, as a caregiver, you want to be right there, like, okay, I'm here. However, you
Mhm.
have to remember that the body has gone into shock,
Okay.
right? So it's like absorbing, like, what just happened to me?
Mhm.
And so it's, just saving, like, just keeping space for that. And then knowing after some time is settled in that that conversation can begin to happen. And that's because, the nervous system's like, what? And you'll see that's when they start to not be able to sleep.
Mhm.
And so that those last or those at right after that, well, there's no rush. There's no rush in it. Shouldn't be a rush. But just to save space, like have someone there to process. And I know they do that in the truck. I know they do that, most of them do that in the truck. And I love that.
Mhm.
I think, though, that after a while, the pile up can be more than just that conversation in the chairs,
Mhm.
in the lounge room. So
What time frame that we've talked a lot in the field about critical incident stress debriefings, critical incident stress teams. You're a part of one of those teams. What time frame? It doesn't necessarily have to be a call on the level that we just discussed, but for instance, one of the ones that we run, unfortunately, with far too frequency, are infants. We've
yeah.
had several infant deaths, unfortunately, within the last year to 18 months here in our
I
district.
know.
And that
Yeah.
takes and that takes a toll on the responder, especially a lot of our younger guys who have kids of their own. So what time frame do you recommend? I think they talk about 72 hours maybe for a critical incident stress talk after a call like that. Are we on the right track with that number?
Well, I say, of course, they are experts and they've tested that.
Mhm.
But here's what happens, though, whenever you run a PEDS call and then you get back from that, and then you have another call,
Mhm.
and then you have another call. So the PEDS call is way back here. And so to me, I would say that that critical incident needs to be addressed within 24 or 48 hours.
Okay.
Because you see what I mean? Because the calls keep coming
Right. Right.
unless they've been put out of service, which is also a good practice.
Mhm.
But at the same time, some people don't want to be put out of service. So, like, I'm here to work. That'll help my mind. Let's keep going. But I do also feel that if a district takes serious about critical incidents such as that, Capete's call, other calls that are just hard to process,
Mhm.
and they have that one person that comes in and says, I'm here just in case you need me,
Mhm.
no rush. Because the other feedback that I've gotten is that sometimes after 72 hours, some of them show up and they're like, oh, I'm past that.
Mhm.
They're really maybe not past it.
Right.
You know, they just, why keep thinking about that?
Mhm.
You know?
And is that where a peer support role might come into play? Is in
I would
that time
say,
period?
mhm,
Okay.
I would say, and closer to, just like 24, 48 hours, like, yes, hey, I'm here.
Mhm.
It just reminds the brain, like, you got my back, you
Right.
know? Yeah. So it's not like, oh, you finally showed up. It's like, oh no, we're here right now. We get that this is a big deal.
The other day, my wife and I were talking, and I was telling her about the recording that we're doing right now. Mentioned the peer support, and her question was along the lines, well, how do you become one of these persons that's on a peer support team? What does that entail? Obviously, not anyone can do it. So what are some
Right.
things if people are out there listening saying, hey, that sounds like something that we need here, and I would like to head up something like that. I would like to be a peer support. I would like to be a resource for the members of my organization. How does someone who is in that mindset go about becoming a peer support person for their organization?
Well, I think that we are lucky that our local here has already that in mind.
Mhm.
So we do have a strong peer support. And so I think that the awareness that there's that opportunity for each district as is becoming more and more. I know that with Florissant, we talked about Missouri CIT being a
Hmm.
part of that as well, because then that lends itself to once a year that if there's any critical incident, then you can go to Branson. It's a free paid experience that's it's just rich with healing for 3 days. You know, we're all there together. We share stories are shared, EMDR treatment, couples counseling. It's just a wonderful experience for first responders. So that is, you know, I think that's one of the best places for someone to reach out and say, I want to be a part of this. Because there's
Hmm.
lots of healing going on during that with Missouri CIT.
You mentioned EMDR just a few moments ago. Can you tell us what EMDR means and how it's helpful for those who do have that situation where they want to have help and they go down that pathway?
Oh yeah, it's just I will tell you just on a personal note, EMDR saved my brain and it saved my heart. I
Hmm.
was had my own traumatic experience, and someone said that you need to do EMDR, and I'm a therapist, right? And I was like, the heck is that? So, um, but what EMDR is, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So when we have something traumatic happen, which isn't just something bad happen, it's when our nervous system can't process it, right? Because something happens to us and then it goes, okay, I know what to do with this. I'll move that on to long-term memory. But when something happens to us and our brain and our nervous system goes, I don't know what this is. I don't really know where to put it. It will come for us and it's like a haunting. It'll just be reminded. But what happens to us is that we swat it away. Like, you know, because it becomes a part of us. It becomes normalized, right? It's just something that we deal with. But with EMDR, what it does, it's a bilateral activation in the brain. And so you can, in my office, we wear headphones, and then we have these TheraTappers
Hmm.
that we have. And so those activate the left side and the right side of the brain. So that means that instead of swatting something away, we look dead at the memory that keeps coming for us. Now that can be difficult, and there's a process to it. But the reason why we do that is because we are going to look all around the memory. We're going to look at what time of day it was, how you're feeling that in your body, like when you know when we tell a story, we feel it whether we know it or not, and that's where it's stored. So we're going to look at where that's showing up in our body. We're going to are there any smells? Do you remember anything in particular? And the reason for the bilateral activation is because it then allows us to look at something emotional in a logical way. And so it calms the nervous system so that we can say, and here's the other thing that happens with trauma, it always makes us turn on ourselves, which is hard for us to process. So it means that we say things like, I wish I would have done that differently. Had I gotten there sooner? What if I would have? These types of things that we're like, turn and go, I can't believe you did that. And so that's also a part of the processing too, and to recognize those false beliefs and say, actually, you did exactly what you should have done. You did what you were trained to do. There was nothing else for you to do. The outcome was the outcome. And so the brain goes, I knew that was true.
Hmm.
And then it goes, okay, I know how to process this. And it moves it right on to long-term memory. And it's so generous that there are those other calls that are similar. The brain will go, oh, I know what to do with that one too. I'll just go ahead and move that too. And then you'll find that even after just like one time with EMDR, there's like a peace that comes over us. And it's like you can recall the memory because it doesn't take away the memory, but it doesn't activate this body anymore. And so there's a peace that can come. And it's like, to me, I wish that everyone would be able to experience EMDR, because it's like getting a clean slate in our hearts, as we're like not burdened by it anymore.
Mm-hmm. So how does EMDR differ from some other types of therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, anything like that?
I will say, like, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's so important, because whatever we tell ourselves will come out. Like, I'll say, don't personalize your anxiety, because the brain doesn't know, or I'm kidding or I'm not kidding. Like, it believes everything we say. So when we say my anxiety got the best of me, no, let's just say this. When I experience anxiety, here's how it feels. We don't want to own those sort of things. And so that's the type of thing with cognitive behavioral therapy, is that we're teaching the brain what to think. And that can be more long-term, and that's also very important. However, with EMDR, what I find is that I have my first responders who come in, we get at it. And therapy isn't long-term, like we spend a year, talking like 3 months, and we're feeling better. And so people come and they are starting to feel better. And I know I had a chief with me. He's like, Kimmy, are you sure this is going to stick? I was like, yes, it is, chief. I promise. And then, even where he stored his trauma was obviously because of the weight of his position was in his shoulders. And he rides his bike now, and all of that's just kind of released from him. And that's another part of EMDR, is just removing it, like addressing it in our body and then pushing it out. Like, we're gonna let go of this. So
you mentioned just a few moments ago that the individual you just discussed rides his bike. We've all been taught that physical exercise is one effective way to deal with traumatic situations. And how helpful do you find, whether it's riding the bike, whether it's walking a half hour a day, how helpful do you find that physical activity as part of an overall, I guess, therapy plan, if you will?
Well, I think it's so important, because you're only with your therapist for 50 minutes, right? And so, and also because that riding your bike or you walking, that's bilateral movement. We always feel better after we have a walk. And so things are changing chemically in us. But if we're intentional about that, if we have something on our heart, and we take a walk, we usually feel better. So that's just a free therapy session, and it does wonders for us. We need that.
Okay. What about someone who says to you, well, if I'm by myself, they're worried that they get too far into their head, if you will, and they start manifesting whatever, having flashbacks, if you will, start overthinking about whatever happened that led them to your office. How do you address someone who brings those types of concerns to you?
So that's like a flooding experience. And here, there's a couple things that I would suggest at that point, is that our brain is very pesky. And it's like, hey, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this. And through DBT, which is another modality, we learn that we give the brain the time it's needing. We give it the attention. And so if we are alone and things come for us, what we can say is, I hear you, brain. We can't do that right now, but at 2:30, we're going to think about it for 30 minutes nonstop. I'll give you all the attention that you need. Because when trauma happens like this and it's constantly processing, the brain is like on overload, and it's a muscle. So we have to learn to regulate our own emotions and thoughts instead of our brain doing it for us. And so by doing this, by setting time aside, like, I hear you, and I know this is important, but we're going to think about it for 30 minutes and that's it. Then both things are satisfied. And while doing that, what I encourage all my clients is we do like a tapping, and it can look like a butterfly tap where, because this is a bilateral movement. And so what we're doing here is we're soothing the body. We're safe. We made that through. We did the best we could. So it's just like kind of like a rocking, a soothing, and the brain is listening. Like, am I safe? So if someone gets that activated on their own, it's because their nervous system is trying to make sure I'm safe, there's no threat. And so to assure it by saying, we're okay,
Mm-hmm.
we made it through, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Okay. So I guess my next question would be, what are some signs? And I think we've talked about a few of them, but if you just reiterate, if someone isn't sure if they're having a problem or they're maybe on the precipice of having a problem, what are some things that they may need to recognize in themselves that say, hey, you might need to talk to somebody? I think we mentioned that the sleep one you touched on
Yeah.
pretty heavily, and as well as the alcohol consumption. But what are some other things maybe that they might need to recognize in their behavior or in their relationship that may indicate that there's a problem that needs to be addressed?
If they're crabby, right?
Okay.
Like I think that that's a measurement for all of us. Like there's something else going on. But I don't think anyone really likes to run crabby.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is just like I'm real quick tempered. I'm driving and I want to drive people off the road. Just having a hard time forgiving people. I
Mm-hmm.
once thought that I wanted to save the world. Now all these people everyone's effed up,
Right.
and it just wears me out now. I don't want to run to Quick Trip again. Like if you have become tired and you're looking at those you care for and go, I have nothing for you anymore. You've
Mm-hmm.
worn me out. Then I think that's a sure sign, because I haven't met a first responder who hasn't started with a gigantic heart. But then after a while, it just gets sore, just bruised by it. As manly and tough and strong as everyone is, still big hearts in there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So just to know that there's like a wearing down, and and also all of you boast that this is the best job in the whole world. However, after, maybe a season or calls after calls, they don't want to go to shift. That attendance is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't you at work? Is there something else going on?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
During our conversation, you've, I think, mentioned more than once the term compassion fatigue. And is some of the behavior you described, could that be a sign of compassion fatigue? And
For
if
sure.
so, how might somebody go about addressing it?
Yeah, it is for sure a measurement that there's something the matter, right? When I teach at the Fire Academy, I always show the clip. Have you seen the Green Mile?
Yes.
Okay, so John Coffey. He's a
Mm-hmm.
healer, you know? And
Right.
so I say that to my class. I say, I see you as the healer. And so you go in, and the scene that's set up for us here is that the warden's wife is very sick. And
Yes.
so John Coffey comes in, with Tom Hanks and all of the other police officers, and they come in and he says, I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, she's got her sickness in her, and everyone's like, I see it. And he said, and he leans down and he takes her sickness out of her. And then you see her color back, you know. And then after that, you'll see that John Coffey gets real tired. And he says to Tom Hanks, I'm tired, boss. I'm
Mm-hmm.
tired of all the bad things that have happened, and he just kind of falls over. And so I think that is a, I mean, it's a true picture of what happens to first responders who go in, they see that we need healing, they see that we need care. And then after a while, they're just real tired. They're
Mhm.
dull. They don't want to be. Their gumption might be gone. And so I think that paying attention to oneself and honoring, like, you don't have to accept that. There's more. Remember when you're super funny, like sitting at the kitchen table at a firehouse is funny, right?
Right.
Remember when you're funny?
Right.
Come back. Remember when you talk, like you you can be him again. You can be her again. Let's get at it.
Mhm.
Just
Right.
like John Coffey, like, I see it. Let's get in there,
There's been a lot of emphasis not only in public safety, EMS, fire, police, but all businesses, all fields, work-life balance. How important is a work-life balance for those of us that are working 48 96s? If we're working 48 hours and we're off 96 hours, how important is that work-life balance for a good mental health outlook, a good feeling about ourselves?
Well, I think that after you come off shift, like if I have a client, I'll say, when are you on? When is your second day?
Mm-hmm.
Because so when you come off shift, this is just my recommendation. That be the day, and that you rest. That's the day that you don't have a ton of commitments, and that your spouse will say, "Hey, I know you need to rest," and that be honored. That time be honored.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to honor it, like, this is good for me to separate myself from and when people say that, I leave work at work, and I love that idea, and I do feel like that we can do that to a certain extent, but we can't leave our nervous system at work. We can't leave our brain at work. And those are the things that at work we saw those things.
Mm-hmm.
So it will come with us, whether we want it to or not, but it's a matter of resting, spending time with the people that you love, and trying to be present. And are there things that you can do that's just for you? Can you go fishing? Can you go play golf for a little bit, and that be just for you? And then after that, it can, what I've seen, and I've talked to plenty of spouses, and then to re-enter in, like, honey, I'm here, I'm
Mm-hmm.
back. And so I think that there's a mutual respect that comes with, I get, because when you're married to a firefighter or a first responder, there's so many good things that come with that. But it's different than being married to somebody who works at Home Depot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a responsibility to the significant other too, to recognize it's a different type of care.
Right.
So I think there's just awareness and respect, and also just like a boundary, like, this first, you know, 8 hours of me being home, I just need to take care of myself
Mm-hmm.
as much as you can.
Right. And you talked to spouses, and you just talked about it a little bit. How important is it for the spouse to be aware of some of the issues that their first responder has to deal with, especially, for instance, my wife, not in the field, has no idea about the field. How important is it for someone married to a woman like that, who doesn't get what the first responder does, maybe doesn't get the fact that, hey, I need 8 hours to just decompress or do whatever?
Yeah.
How important is it for that spouse to have that understanding of that need to be by themselves, if you will?
There's a wonderful book called I Love a Firefighter, and
Okay.
it shares with the significant other terminology, what a shift looks like, what rank means, like, it just gives education. But I would say that if this is a commitment that you've said, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with somebody who is going to devote their life to other people, that you just have to know. Now, I do have people, and I understand too, is that they won't share what they've experienced out of protection. But if there's a close relationship, your significant other is going to be able to tell that something bothers you. And so that there's an honesty that should always be happening. Like, I'm not going to tell you the details, but I really had a bad call. And so if you could just give me some time in that, and just to, again, save space for for them so that they can decompress and be at home, you know. And so I would say it's, you know, as much as I need to know, the significant other needs to know.
So for our listeners that have been with us for the last 45, 50 minutes that we've been talking, and they're saying, okay, this sounds like some of the things that I've experienced, and I think I need to talk to somebody. Obviously, in the St. Louis area, we know where to go, but what about for other places in the country? How do they find someone who may be not specialized, but works with first responders and is someone that first responders recognize as a counselor or someone who understands the specific needs of our community?
Well, I'm on it. The International Association for Firefighters, they have a provider list through the whole country. Yeah. And so, and we've been vetted. We've, you know, like, you just can't get on that list for no reason, you know. And so that's a trusted list. So I would say that would be the first place to start.
Okay. What are some other resources that that you might recommend or that are out there for people that are not feeling well, if you will, may have some of the things that we discussed, sleeping issues, maybe substance problems? Are there resources for them to address some of these issues? Obviously, we've talked about counseling, but maybe some other resources that they can look to help them.
Well, I want to go to extreme. Okay. So one of the things that I love to say, and I've done this myself, I won't ask somebody to do it unless I've done it. But Josh Hildebrand is a firefighter for a local fire district here, and he does breath and exposure. And what that is that you immerse yourself in ice water. And what that does is that you're starting to like learn to regulate in your body. So you do that, and then you go and sit in a sauna for 10 minutes, and then you do that 3 times. So what my experience was is that I was just a little bit more gentle with myself after this experience. And so it's resetting the nervous system. And so the first day I was just a little bit quieter, you know, a little bit tired from the experience. And then the next day I was like, okay, I could kind of hear some of my voice, like, oh, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. And on the third day after this experience, it was like, there I am. And it's like it reset my whole nervous system. And so I would say that if you can do that type of, you know, practice, that I would do that, you know, because we want to feel better quickly, but these are like long lasting things. And one of the things that within the last week or so, First Responder Wellness, which is my non-for-profit for the mental strength of first responders, we have joined hands with the International Association for Firefighters Behavioral Health Center in Maryland. And so that they are caring for those who may have substance abuse and who have post-traumatic stress. And so with First Responder Wellness and the Behavioral Health Center, anyone in our local or in Missouri, if they need to go, it can be covered under insurance. And it's about 6 to 8 week commitment. And if there's a need for airfare, First Responder Wellness, we provide for that. If they need to have their dog kenneled, we can do that. If there's childcare needs, we can do that. we want to make sure that there's no barrier for them to go. And here's been the experience when they go is that so much healing happens. This last weekend we had a pickleball tournament, and someone from down south said that they had two members that went this last spring, and they're different. They got their heart back. So there are, there is things that you can do, including yoga as well. That's a major deal. Learning meditation is a great thing because we're all the time trying to regulate our body. And then to extreme, which isn't extreme, it's just like it makes sense. Like go where they're, their heart is to care for those who have leaned on substances to get them through, and that they've taken serious post-traumatic stress. So
we had a member who just came back from that location in
Yay!
April, and he's back at work, back on the floor. It was in a very, very dark place, and I can reiterate everything you said about how the facility works. They did a wonderful job. Like I said, he's back to work. Seems to be much, much better. So I can't support enough what you said about that place. It's just they did a phenomenal job, and we had members that took him to the airport, flew up there with him, and got him to the facility, and then came back. So it's a great resource. And just to reiterate what you said, it's a fantastic place for that. If they
it is. I know. And that we get to partner with them, meaning they trust us. Like, I'm like, oh, wow, that was a huge one for me.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we talked about exercise. One of the other things we didn't talk about, though, that goes along was diet. We've talked obviously about substance abuse, but how important is diet for those that may not have the ability to work in a fixed station, like those of us in the fire district. So we're not preparing meals. They may be in an ambulance and system status management, where fast food might be one of the only dietary options for them. So how important is their trying to adhere to a healthier diet as far as mental health goes?
Well, I do, they always said like we are what we eat. And so there's a lot of guilt that can come with that because of, the circumstances of being on the ambulance. Like I got to go to Quick Trip. I just did a ride along with fluorescent police a couple weeks ago, and we had to grab a soda at Quick Trip, and I got a little taquito. And so it isn't ideal. And sometimes you do need to give yourself some grace with that, but on your days off to maybe make up for that. So it doesn't have to be like a rigid thing, but just know that anything we put in our body, there's fruit. It'll manifest it somehow. And so because the system that we have here is all the time communicating, and so what we put in obviously is going to affect us. It's our fuel. So and there are things that, bog us down after like a big Mexican meal. Like I'm super sleepy. I'm ready for a nap. You may not want to do that while you're on shift,
That's true.
So just to be aware that whatever you put in is going to be your fuel. I think that's really important to, it's a part of the healthy journey.
Well, we're coming up on an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you again for taking some time to talk with us. We've covered a lot of ground. As we get ready to close out, is there anything that you want to leave us? Any recommendations, words of wisdom, anything you've experienced that you think may help whoever's listening out there in the world today?
Yeah. So just that my experience has been that people who have said, like, with the old mentality of suck it up, like this is, you said you would, when they sit and their heart gets loud, like it gets softer or even stronger after care, you're worth it. Like it doesn't take long I'll say like, you got 6 weeks because you might be different in 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And so this is, it's an act of love to say, I've had enough and it's piling up on me. It's an
Mhm.
act of love for yourself. It's an act of love for everyone around you and those you serve. So there is, get the right therapist. I had a firefighter who was like walked in and the therapist had like all these porcelain, um, figurines. And he was like, I don't know that I'm in the right place. So make sure you vet us. Not everyone deserves to know your story. It's very sacred. So if it doesn't, you get to march right out, you know,
Mhm.
because your story is sacred, your time is sacred. So not everybody, is the perfect match. But there's a lot of people out there that are caring for first responders. So I would say, yeah, keep trying.
Okay. Um, for your nonprofit that you mentioned, the First Responder Wellness Initiative, are they on social media? How can people find out more about that? That may
Okay.
maybe contribute and learn more about what you're doing with that.
We are on Facebook, First Responder Wellness. And every year we have a volleyball tournament that's become beloved.
Mhm.
And people are like, hey, when are we signing up? Which has been amazing. Each year we've raised about $7,000 or $8,000. But this year, maybe just more. We have even more that are interested. And we have relationships with our local canteen. We have relationships with, diners around, like Florissant Diner. We pay for their breakfast if you work on holidays.
Mhm.
But most important, well, I wouldn't say most importantly, all relationships that we have that we're entrusted with are important, but that new relationship that we have with International Association of Firefighters, Behavioral Health Center, anything that if you want to give, you're giving to something so very important. And so, yeah, and ahead of time, we say thank you for even considering.
Excellent. One last question, totally unrelated to mental health or the first responder community. Um, what is the last book that you read?
Oh gosh, what a great question. Oh, okay. I went to Mexico in March, and
Mm-hmm.
I had this book it's called Good Chemistry, because
Okay.
like I'm a nerd about like connection and why we like the people we like, so I thought this book was going to be good. And anyway, I couldn't get into it. So there was this book, but I know it sounds cheesy, by Nicholas Sparks. And it was about this. Um, there's a mailbox in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I forget the name of the book, but people write about their love stories and they put it in the mailbox. And there's this little bench next to the mailbox, and you can go in the mailbox and read of these like unrequited loves, or I saw her at a grocery store and I can't keep my mind off of her. Like, it just was the coolest book. So,
Okay.
and I loved it so much that I haven't finished it. So I only have like 30 more pages because I don't want it to be over.
Excellent. I'm trying to look up the name of the book, but
Could you, that would make me feel, it's by Nicholas Sparks, which seems a little cheesy, but
yes, I think it's called Every Breath.
yes, it's called Every Breath.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yes.
was so good.
Hmm. So Nicholas Sparks, Every Breath, and my wife is a Nicholas Sparks fan, so I wonder if she's familiar with that.
Well, and that mailbox was just like, is there really? And so, yes, there really is this
Mhm.
mailbox on this beach that you just come up on. Oh,
Wow.
I love stuff like that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to leave us with, Kim, before we let you go? Any social media, anything other than the Facebook for First Responder Wellness?
I think that's it. Just thank
Okay.
you so much for your time and for your trust and asking me. I appreciate it.
No, Kim, thank you. I've very much enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Um, for those of us, for everyone out there, if you want to connect with us, the web or the Instagram page for our podcast is not_a_fib_podcast. That's not_a_fib_podcast. You can email us at not.a.fib.podcast@gmail.com. So, Kim, great conversation. Great way to
Yes.
close out Mental Health Awareness Month. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say to everyone out there, if you feel that you may have any problems, if your loved one or family has indicated to you that you just don't seem right lately, don't hesitate to reach out and speak to someone. Kim mentioned go to the IAF website, find a vetted counselor, therapist who's versed at working with first responders, and talk to somebody. I've done it in the past, and it'll definitely help you. Until next month, thank you very much for joining us. Be safe out there and have a good day.